Picture this. A man stands in the middle of a Greek assembly. He doesn't raise a sword. He doesn't betray anyone. He simply says one sentence: maybe, we should negotiate with Persia. The crowd doesn't argue. They don't shout. They surround him, and they stone him to death on the spot. His crime wasn't treason, it was hesitation. This is 479 BC. The 300 Spartans are already dead. Athens is ashes, and mercy has officially expired. History likes to remember Thermopylae as a noble sacrifice, a beautiful defeat. But what came after was not beautiful, it was revenge. When the Greeks marched to Plataea, they were no longer defending freedom, they were hunting. The Spartans didn't come to fight, they came to erase. What happened on that plain was not a heroic battle, it was an execution carried out by an army that had decided no one deserved to survive. This is the story they don't teach you, the moment the victims became butchers. This is the Battle of Plataea. When people talk about the Persian Wars, they imagine unity, brave cities standing together against an empire. That is a myth. In 479 BC, Greece was not united. It was fractured, traumatized, and furious. Thermopylae hadn't inspired hope, it had poisoned the air. The Spartans were dead, Athens was burned, and every city understood the same truth: Persia would return. Refugees filled the countryside. Families slept in fields where homes once stood. Temples were blackened ruins. Gods had failed to protect them. And fear does something dangerous to people. It doesn't make them brave. It makes them cruel. Across Greece, moderation disappeared. Anyone who spoke of compromise was seen as a collaborator. Not because Persia had won, but because survival had replaced morality. The Athenians were the first to break. Homeless, humiliated, and desperate, they sent a message to Sparta. It wasn't a request, it was an ultimatum. If you don't march now, we will make peace with Persia. And Sparta understood exactly what that meant. Athens didn't just have soldiers, it had ships. If Athens defected, the Greek navy would belong to the Persian Empire. Sparta could survive sieges, but it could not survive isolation. And so, behind closed doors, the Spartan elders made a decision that went against everything they pretended to be. They chose total war. Not defense, not negotiation. Erasure. When Sparta finally mobilized, it wasn't symbolic. 5,000 full Spartan citizens marched, the elite, men trained since childhood to kill in formation. But they didn't march alone. For every Spartan, 7 helots were armed and forced to follow. Slaves, men who hated Sparta, men now expected to die for it. This wasn't an army. It was a moving pressure bomb. 45,000 men left the Peloponnese in silence. No speeches, no heroics. Just boots on stone, and a decision that could not be undone. Because by the time they reached Plataea, there would be no retreat. Only winners. And the dead. While the Greeks were marching north, the war was already waiting for them. King Xerxes had returned to Asia, but he hadn't abandoned Greece. He left behind the most dangerous man in the Persian Empire. Mardonius. Mardonius was not a king. He didn't care about ceremony. He cared about results. He understood something the Greeks did not. This war would not be won by courage. It would be won by position. When the Persians withdrew from Athens, many Greeks believed they were retreating. They were wrong. Mardonius deliberately abandoned the ruins of the city and moved his army north, into the wide-open plains near Plataea. Flat land, perfect ground for cavalry. A killing field. There, along the Asopus River, he built something unusual. Not tents, not temporary camps. A fortified base, wooden walls, watchtowers. A city of war. Mardonius wasn't planning a heroic clash, he was planning to wait. Because he knew the Greek weakness. Hoplites were devastating in formation, but they were slow. And they needed water. When the Greek army finally arrived, nearly 100,000 men, they stopped at the foothills. They saw the Persian camp below them, endless tents, horses, smoke rising calmly into the sky. The Spartans did not advance. For days, both armies watched each other. A silent standoff. Fear versus patience. And Mardonius blinked first, but not the way the Greeks expected. He unleashed his cavalry. Persian horsemen rode out across the plain, circling the Greek positions, firing arrows, retreating, returning. They weren't trying to win a battle. They were trying to humiliate. The message was clear: come down here and die. Greek soldiers were wounded every day. Arrows slipped through armor gaps. Men screamed, and still, they did not move. Then something changed. A Persian cavalry commander rode too close. His horse was struck. He fell. And the Greeks killed him. They dragged his body back uphill, displaying it like a trophy. For the first time, the Greeks felt hope. Mardonius felt something else. Annoyance. He didn't respond with rage. He responded with calculation. Persian cavalry rode around the Greek army, not toward the soldiers, but toward their supply lines. Food convoys were intercepted, animals slaughtered, drivers killed. Bread stopped arriving. Then water became the target. Persian horsemen trampled the Gargaphia spring, the only reliable source of water nearby. In hours, it turned to mud. Now the Greek army was trapped. No food, no water, cavalry controlling the plains. Heat did the rest. Bronze armor became an oven, men fainted, discipline cracked. Arguments broke out between city-states. Attack now, retreat now, stay. Every option meant death. Finally, the Greek commanders made a desperate decision. A night withdrawal. Silent, ordered, controlled. It was the most dangerous maneuver possible. And it failed almost immediately. Units moved at different times. Some panicked and ran. Others refused to move at all. By dawn, the Greek army was scattered. The Spartans stood exposed on open ground. And Mardonius saw everything. He laughed. The Greeks weren't repositioning. They were breaking. And he ordered the advance. The trap was closed. Dawn came slowly over Plataea. Not with light, but with realization. The Greeks woke up to silence. No shouting, no horns, no movement. And that was worse than noise. During the night, everything had gone wrong. Units had separated. Orders had been misunderstood. Fear had spread faster than commands. The center of the Greek army was gone. Some contingents had retreated too far. Others were still moving. But the Spartans were exposed. Strung out across open ground. No hills, no cover, no cavalry. When the Persian scouts reported this, Mardonius did not hesitate. He didn't form ranks. He didn't plan speeches. He gave a single order. Advance. What followed was not a charge. It was a flood. Persian cavalry surged forward first, riding hard across the plain, kicking dust into the morning air. Behind them came the infantry, archers by the tens of thousands. They crossed the river without resistance. From the Spartan line, the sound reached them before the sight. A low thunder, hooves, feet, shouting in foreign tongues. Pausanias turned and saw the horizon darken. The Persians were coming. Instinct screamed one command, run. But Spartans did not run. Pausanias ordered the army to halt. Shields down, spears planted, knees to the ground. Then he did something no modern army would ever understand. He turned his back on the enemy. He called for a priest. In the ancient world, battles were not fought when men were ready. They were fought when the gods allowed it. A goat was dragged forward. Its throat was cut, the blood soaked into the dirt. The priest examined the liver. The signs were bad. The gods said no. So the Spartans waited. Persian arrows fell like rain. They struck shields with a metallic scream. They slipped through armor gaps, necks, thighs, feet. Men cried out, and were ordered to stay still. Behind the Spartan line stood the helots. Slaves armed with wicker shields, barely protected, barely trained. They died first. Arrows did not care about status. They did not care about citizenship. The helots watched their masters kneel in silence, while death worked methodically through the ranks. Panic began to spread. Not among the Spartans. Among their allies. The Tegeans shifted uneasily. Men whispered, "Why aren't we fighting? Why aren't we moving?" Another goat was sacrificed. Another bad sign. The waiting became torture. Sweat ran into eyes. Blood pooled beneath shields. Arrows kept coming. One Spartan was carried away, dying. His name was Callicrates, known for his strength, his beauty. An arrow had pierced his side. As he lay bleeding, he did not curse the Persians. He cursed fate. "I don't mind dying for Greece," he said, "but I mind dying without striking a blow." The Persian infantry moved closer. They shouted insults. They mocked the Spartans. "Where is your courage now? Where are your gods?" Pausanias looked toward the distant temple of Hera. He prayed. Not for victory. For permission. A third sacrifice. Silence. Then the priest looked up. The signs had changed. The gods had spoken. Yes. Pausanias stood. He raised his spear. That was the signal. The Spartans rose as one. Not slowly, not cautiously. They surged forward. What followed was not a clash. It was impact. The Persian shield wall shattered under the weight of bronze. Spears punched through armor. Shields slammed into chests. The Spartans did not shout. They worked. Step forward, thrust, push, kill. The helots followed behind, finishing the wounded, dragging enemies down. The battle turned into a grind. Dust filled the air. Men fought by sound and shape. And at the center of it all stood Mardonius, mounted on a white horse, surrounded by elite guards. As long as he lived, the Persians fought. The Spartans saw him, and they began to move toward him. Slowly, relentlessly. The Persian line bent, then broke. Mardonius was struck down. How? History disagrees. A spear, a stone. But when he fell, everything changed. The Persian army lost its spine. Men dropped shields. Men ran. The greatest army on earth collapsed into chaos. The field of Plataea became a slaughterhouse. And the Spartans did not stop. They did not take prisoners. They did not forgive. This was not Thermopylae. This time, they survived. And survival had changed them. The battle did not end when the Persians broke. That was only the beginning. When Mardonius fell, discipline vanished. The Persian army didn't retreat, it collapsed. Men ran without orders. Units dissolved into panic. Soldiers threw down shields that had protected them across continents. They fled toward the only place that felt safe, their fortified camp. Wooden walls, watchtowers, a stockade built to control Greece. Tens of thousands forced themselves inside, packed shoulder to shoulder. No formations, no exits. They believed the walls would save them. They were wrong. The Spartans arrived first, and stopped. Not because they were merciful. Because they didn't know how to take a wall. Siege warfare was not the Spartan way. They waited. Then the Athenians arrived. Engineers, builders, men who understood structures, and how to break them. A section of the stockade was torn open. And through that gap poured the full weight of Spartan rage. What followed was not a battle. It was extermination. Inside the camp, there was nowhere to run. No formations to hide behind. No mercy to negotiate. The Greeks did not take prisoners. They moved methodically, tent by tent, body by body. Ancient sources struggle to describe it, not because they didn't know what happened, but because they didn't want to admit it. The ground turned to mud, then to blood. By nightfall, the Persian army in Greece no longer existed. Of the hundreds of thousands who had marched with Mardonius, only a few thousand escaped. An empire had been broken in a single afternoon. When the killing finally stopped, the Greeks stood in silence. Around them was wealth beyond imagination. Gold vessels, silver tables, silks dyed purple, chests filled with coin. The mobile palace of a superpower. Pausanias entered Mardonius's tent. He looked at the luxury, the excess, the softness. And he laughed. He ordered the Persian cooks to prepare a feast, exactly as they would have for their general. Then he ordered his own Spartan cooks to prepare a traditional meal. Black broth, blood, vinegar. He placed the two meals side by side. And said to his commanders, "Look at how these men lived, and yet they came to take what little we had." It became a legend. A symbol of Spartan virtue. But history noticed something else. Pausanias didn't destroy the gold. He kept it. Victory had saved Greece. But it poisoned its heroes. Athens returned home confident, and soon built an empire of its own. Sparta returned home victorious, and suspicious. And Pausanias? He returned changed. He dressed like a Persian, lived like one, surrounded himself with foreign guards. The man who broke the Persian army began to admire it. Accusations followed, trials, rumors of treason. Finally, the Spartans moved. Pausanias fled to a temple, claiming sanctuary. Spartan law forbade killing him there. So they chose another way. They sealed the doors. And legend says the first stone was placed by his own mother. Pausanias died alone, starved, forgotten. The victor of Plataea ended as a warning. This is why we celebrate Thermopylae more than Plataea. A noble defeat is easier to love than an ugly victory. But without Plataea, there would be no Western world to remember Thermopylae at all. Freedom survived, not because the Greeks were pure, but because, for one terrible day, they were willing to be monsters. Remember the 300. But never forget what came after them.